Hi everyone, Dan Eddy here, author of CRIMMO, the Peter Crimmins Story, the definitive biography of the former Hawthorn captain Peter Crimmins, who sadly died of testicular cancer back in 1976 at the age of just 28, left behind young wife Gwen and two young boys, Ben and Sam, and it was one of the most heartfelt stories in football history. Probably still is. The inspirational fight of Peter to try and fight through his illness for 2 years and come back to football and lead Hawthorn to a premiership, which ultimately failed. The disease took hold and he sadly passed away just 3 days after the Hawks won the 1976 premiership. And there's the famous photo, which I'm sure we've all seen at some point, of Peter's teammates taking the cup back to Peter's house in Croydon late at night after the grand final, and the pride on his face, despite the fact that he clearly was near the end of his life, was really touched a chord. It won the photo of the year. Clive McKinnon took the photograph and it won the award, and deservedly so. It's lived on forever, and as has Peter's name. His name is adorned on the medal, the Peter Crimmins medal for Hawthorn's Best and Fairest, which Gwen presents every year. So his name well and truly lives on at Hawthorn, and you speak to anyone, and I spoke with dozens and dozens of people who knew Peter, whether they went to school with him, did his homework for him, for example, or grew up with him in Shepparton, or went to Assumption College with him, where Peter was a standout footballer and cricketer at Assumption, one of the most famous schools in Australia, or at Hawthorn, or people he played football against, or people he met through his work with Puma as national sales manager with the likes of our famous Olympian Raylene Boyle and so on. Peter had an impact on everyone that he crossed paths with, and I tried to track down as many as I could and try and paint a really rounded picture of Peter's life, the good and the bad and the tough and the fun and you name it. And it's a credit to the people I interviewed that they were willing to be so honest with Peter's life and their connection to him. And there's some really fond memories shared by so many people who might have just been Hawthorn supporters who just admired him from afar but worshipped the man. They've still got his number on the back of their duffel coats to this day. So it's a 500 pager, so sit down with a couple of coffees. It might take a little while to get through it, but I promise you it's worth it. Lots of photos as well, a couple of glossy sections there, some never before seen photos. I was really lucky that Peter's parents, Myrna and Brian, kept every snippet of information about Peter throughout his life, when he was a little boy through to when he was a star at Hawthorn, and their meticulous keeping of information was critical for a biographer like myself, who wants to paint the full picture of what a person's life was like. There's the young family there, taken from the age back in 1975, and you can see just how young Ben and Sam were, and how tragic it was that Peter died just a few months, probably 12 or 13 months after that photo. So sitting down with Gwen and Ben and Sam was a privilege for me, but at the same time it was really, really tough to hear their stories and what it took to grow up without a husband and a dad. It's been really tough for all of them, still is. The boys have grown into fine young men despite the challenges they faced. And Gwen has really fought on and kept Peter's torch burning, really. She's always willing to speak up on his behalf and share the story and talk about the struggles of dealing with someone who has cancer and the real efforts that it takes. Gwen's sister, Lynn, nursed Peter in his final days because there was no palliative care back then. So she sort of sacrificed her life to come and live with the family and help nurse him and help Gwen as well. So really different times. I spoke with a medical expert at Peter MacCallum Cancer Clinic to get an idea of how Peter's illness evolved and could it have been caught earlier. Answer to that's probably yes, which is a sad reality. And the other sad part to that is that if he'd contracted the cancer maybe 4 or 5 years later, he may still be here today. The advances in technology ramped up over the next decade or so, helped in part by money raised after Peter's death, actually, with the Peter Crimmins Memorial Cancer Trust, which was set up to aid cancer research. So in that way, he was able to contribute, but sadly, he was a few years too early for the right treatment to actually help him, and he tried everything. People would send back religious water from overseas and say, drink this. You know, they just tried everything to try and save the great man's life, but sadly, it was too late, unfortunately. But he lives on to this day, and I've really tried to capture that with a social history of the times Peter grew up in, and hopefully that comes out in the text, and I hope you enjoy reading CRIMMO. Love to get your feedback. You can look me up at daneddybooks.com and let me know what you think of the story, because it's it's one that should be told. It's taken a long time to be told, and I think Gwen and Peter's brothers and the boys as well, and everyone was ready to tell Peter's story, and I've been honoured to be the biographer tasked with doing that. So I hope you enjoy CRIMMO as much as I enjoyed writing it, and stay safe.